Okay, hi, so welcome to this video on plant cell organization. Now I'm going to keep this video fairly brief. We're just going to talk about different tissues which exist within a plant and the function that each tissue has. So first of all, what we're going to do is have a look at a leaf. Right, now you might not think this looks like a leaf. This is basically a cross section of a leaf, right? So if you're looking from side on and you'd cut into the leaf, you can see from bottom. Okay, so this is the bottom of the leaf and this is the top of the leaf. Okay, so let's jump straight in. So what we have here is on the top, let's just highlight that here. What we have there is the cuticle, right? Sometimes called the waxy cuticle. Now the waxy cuticle sits on top of the leaf, right, above all these different tissues. And basically what it does is it stops or reduces the amount of water that is lost via transpiration. Okay, so reduces water loss by transpiration. Okay, so transpiration basically means evaporation of water out of a plant. Okay, so transpiration is not something new. It's basically evaporation, but it's from a plant. That's a problem for plants because it means that their water can just be lost, right? So if their water is being evaporated out, then they're losing water and that can cause the plant to die. So they want to reduce the amount of transpiration so that they can maintain their water. The waxy cuticle is something that helps do that. Okay, what we have next is the upper epidermis. Okay, so the upper epidermis are these cells here that run along the top just under the cuticle. Now the role of the upper epidermis, okay, so the upper epidermis is to protect the palisade layer. Okay, you'll notice that the palisade layer is the next one down, so it protects those. Also, the cells of upper epidermis are transparent, allowing light through. Okay, so light needs to come through the leaf because below it is basically what's going to be carrying out photosynthesis. And that's what we'll come on to next. Below it, we have the palisade mesophyll, right? This word mesophyll, just try and remember it. It's nothing too fancy. It just means in the middle. Okay, so your middle of the leaf, basically these two parts, we call the mesophyll, right? And this is the palisade mesophyll. Now, the palisade mesophyll contain many chloroplasts. Okay, so palisade cells contain many chloroplasts in order for photosynthesis to occur. Right, that is the main role of this layer here. Yeah, the palisade mesophyll. That's where the majority of photosynthesis is going to be happening because you can see all these tiny dots here. These are all chloroplasts. All of those are going to be carrying out photosynthesis. Okay, so I'll carry on a different color just so that we can distinguish. Next we have this layer here, which is the spongy mesophyll, right? The spongy mesophyll. Okay, you'll notice that those cells also contain chloroplasts. However, there are gaps in between them, right? There aren't really any gaps in between the palisade cells, but the spongy mesophyll cells, there are massive air gaps in between them. Okay, so spongy mesophyll cells also carry out photosynthesis. However, there are air spaces in between, which allows gases to diffuse in and out of the leaf. So sorry, I've gone slightly past the wall of the page here, so I'll move that down here. So your spongy mesophyll, they carry out photosynthesis. They also have chloroplasts, right? But they also have these gaps, and those gaps allow gases to diffuse in and out, right? If you think photosynthesis, requires carbon dioxide, okay, it also produces oxygen. So CO2 must be able to diffuse in, and oxygen is produced, and that must be able to diffuse out, right? Also, we have water vapor can diffuse out of there as well. Water vapor is obviously water as a gas, and so that's why you have those spaces. Alright, now if we look below it, we have the lower epidermis. Right, now the lower epidermis, let me just redraw that because I'm going to avoid those cells on purpose. The lower epidermis basically has the same role as the upper epidermis, right? It's another protective layer. So the lower epidermis protects just like the upper epidermis does, and I'm not going to speak too much more about it. What I am going to speak about, and so I'll change color again, are these guys, right? So these cells here. Notice they're in the lower epidermis layer, but they are special kinds of cells. These are called guard cells. Guard cells. The guard cells have a very important job. You'll notice that in between the guard cells we have this thing called stoma, right? The stoma. Now that is singular, plural, that is stomata, right? So I'll write that here and put it in brackets. Stomata, that's plural. That is this hole in the bottom of the leaf. If I rub that out, you can see it better. Okay, so you've got many of these holes in the bottom of the leaf, and they are important for letting in and letting out gases to and from the environment. So they can release CO2 into the environment, take in CO2 from the environment, obviously, for photosynthesis, and then release oxygen back into the environment. Right? Now, these stomata, however, need to be opened or closed depending on the environmental conditions. For example, if they were open and it was a really, really hot day, then you will be actually losing lots of water vapor from here. Okay, so transpiration will be occurring. So remember we spoke about transpiration being the evaporation of water from plants. Now if there are gaps, so these stomata, if they are open, then there's going to be more loss of water vapor, so transpiration is going to be occurring faster. That's going to damage the plant because the plant's going to be losing water, right? And therefore we want those stomata, or those holes, closed, and the guard cells will actually close them. On the other hand, if it's not really very hot, but we have a lot of, let's say, water vapor in the air, and there's a lot of sunlight, so we want photosynthesis to be happening fast, then you might open the stomata, right? That allows more gases to diffuse in, so CO2 to diffuse in, which will increase your rate of photosynthesis. Okay, so the stomata really have an important role in allowing the plant to survive, because they need to make sure that the plant isn't losing too much water, and also that the plant is getting enough CO2 in order to carry out photosynthesis. That is controlled by the guard cells. Okay, so the guard cells control the opening and closing of the stomata. Okay, this is in response to the environment. That was spelt wrong. Response to the environmental conditions, I should say. Mental conditions. And allows gas exchange whilst reducing rates of transpiration. Okay, now there are three more types of tissue I want to mention really briefly, and I'm not going to label them on this diagram because I think this diagram is full up as it is, but those are the following. So we have meristem tissue, xylem tissue, and phloem tissue. Okay, now meristem tissue basically is the plant's version of stem cells. Okay, but plants have meristem on the tips of growing roots and shoots. Okay, so on the tips of on the tips of growing roots and shoots, meristem tissue is found. Okay, it contains, or it consists of, undifferentiated cells which will differentiate into other types of plant tissue. Okay, so it's basically the plant version of stem cells, where stem cells are undifferentiated cells which can differentiate into certain specialized types of cells. The meristem tissue is where the plant's version of those are found, but we call them meristem cells. Now in the next couple of videos we're going to talk about xylem and phloem, but I'll quickly describe what they do. So xylem tissue transports water and minerals from the roots to the rest of the plant. Okay, extremely important. This is the main source of water for plants. Okay, they get it from the roots, and the roots transport that water to the rest of the plant. Also dissolved in that water is going to be minerals, so ions such as nitrates and other ions. They're going to be transported to the rest of the plant where they are needed as well. Okay, the phloem, rather than transporting water and minerals, it transports food. Okay, and when we say food, we're basically talking about sugars, but the role of the phloem is to transport food. I'm going to put sugars such as glucose, because that's what we really mean by food. Okay, from source to sink. Okay, and what that means is from where it's made to where it's needed. Okay, sometimes, so often, this is from the leaf to the rest of the plant, but not always. Okay, sometimes you may have a food store, so a sugar store in other parts of the plant, and then they are needed in other parts of the plant. So it's not always from the leaf elsewhere, whereas in xylem, it's always from the roots to the other parts of the plant. Yeah, so from the roots to the rest of the plant is the xylem, and the phloem, though, it can be transported from one place to another, but it doesn't have to start at just the leaves. It could be somewhere else. Okay, so I think that's about enough for this video. I hope that made sense. But if it didn't, then please do feel free to ask any more questions in the comment box below, or send me a direct email using the link. But as usual, please like and subscribe, because it really does help me out. And of course, you'll be notified when new videos become